So Sondra, thank you so much for agreeing to do this conversation. We are here immersed, literally immersed in your exhibition at the Serpentine. But before we talk about the show here, I want to begin with the beginnings and ask you how you became an artist, how you came to art or how art came to you.
I was going to school in Texas, and my freshman year in high school, I chose art. And I really just kind of fell in love with everything. I started working in ceramics. And that was the moment where I started going to school regularly and on time, just so I can get to my art classes. So it was kind of like a necessity that I found art. Yeah, and I've been in it ever since.
And now we're in the exhibition here at the Serpentine, and you gave the exhibition the title Typhoon Coming On. Can you tell us a little bit about the way you approach this space and the very unusual installation you came up with?
What I love about working in installation is that you can do this micro-macro kind of embodiment type of thing. So the outside walls are covered in a video that spans 11 projectors on the walls. And on the inside spaces, you have these kind of discrete pieces that kind of have these tentacles that kind of branch out to the the projected kind of waterscape, Turner typescape. And then here in this gallery, we have these workstations that are you're literally going inside of the body of these machines in order to kind of have this conversation with them. So you have these moments of being encircled inside of an embodied kind of architecture that I really like the idea of.
And one of these workstations actually gives the viewer basically images of your own avatar. So I wanted to ask you to tell us about this, and also a little bit in a wider sense about how it connects to the family, because you very often take stories from the family, but they're somehow both documentation, but they're also fiction. It's a mix.
Yeah. The workstations are fun, first of all. They're fun to make. They're fun to kind of figure out. But they're also kind of these reminders for me as these precautions of how I have this preoccupation with work and being productive and all of this stuff. So I think of the machines as kind of as intelligent. I'm really interested in the hardware, the metal, these things as having kind of having these lives. So they're exercise equipment, and they're made to be used. They're made to be used in relationship to the body. They're made to kind of make the body better. And in one of the cases, they're made to make the body better and to make you a more efficient worker. They want to keep you healthy so you can continue laboring. And so the machines are made, especially the bike workstation specifically, is made for me, so I can get in and get out, just so much that the machine doesn't fall apart. So it's incredibly precarious machine, and it also reminds me of the precarity of my body. And so, in thinking about going on this thing and getting a good workout and all this stuff, I am required to think thoroughly about what it means to be productive, and to really problematize that for me. I think, and with these machines, I also think about access and what it means to make something accessible, and how the conversations around accessibility have been kind of taken over by capitalism. And I really want to kind of question or acknowledge that there are some spaces that we talk about accessibility in that we should not want to be a part of. I also find that a lot of things do kind of start in my family. Talking about blackness and technology, I do that all the time, and it's not just kind of a theory, kind of hanging out. It's embedded in my family. My mom's been working in radiology for all her entire life. She worked in film, and now she works on a 3-monitor workstation, just like I do. A 3-monitor workstation with a standing desk. That was the first time I encountered one of those things in person with my mom,
And in the second piece, the It's actually another machine. It's a rowing machine. But what is interesting also is the very sculptural aspect of it. So the way how you combine actually these very physical materials and show a kind of a materiality of the moving image would be interesting to hear more. And maybe we can pin it down with that one piece.
I think it's always been important to me to understand video as an object. Video is ephemeral, but it's also kind of like, it's a very kind of like based in like the solid. It's based in all of these things. I went to a school that had a really kind of like, I don't know if I can say this, like classical video department. It was highly like process based, based in the analog and digital, and that education really kind of made me understand that video had an objectness to it. And so I feel like I'm always kind of like searching for that physicality in how the video is displayed.
We should talk about the piece we do this interview in. Yes. So it's an installation again. We have your signature chroma blue on the walls, but then we have a projected animation of an extreme close-up of your skin, and then we have a third piece, which is actually a piece which uses a lot of footage. Police brutality is depicted. I think a lot comes from Fox News. So let's talk about this room and maybe your notion of how you appropriate this found footage.
Yeah. So the blue screen and the skin are opposite each other because the blue screen and chroma key green are supposed to be hues of color that are furthest away from skin tone. So that's, when I heard about that, that was already something that was incredibly confusing because like I wasn't sure whose skin tone that was supposed to be. But this, the skin, or the flesh, I like to think of it as, is an animation on another ocean modifier. It's my skin. That's been highly modulated, highly contrasted, and the texture has been kind of created to kind of make this kind of membrane that feels like it's moving, slowly. And I've been thinking about the depiction of black and brown skin colors in film and video production, and the warming up of a skin tone in order to make something more palatable. And so I've just decided to go off the kind of deep end into kind of a consumption of something that feels like it's burning alive, or something that is like this type of connective tissue that is doing more than just kind of like the representative work of like kind of a being. The video on the monitors, it's interesting, like the work is definitely about police brutality, but it doesn't show any images of people being extinguished by police. And so what I'm interested in is all of the things around those moments, the protest, the camera, really specifically, and surveillance. So the new piece is really kind of it's more kind of honed in on what that is, and really trying to think through what it is to appropriate images. And for the longest time, I feel like I kind of had this relationship to footage that was like, I'm a working poor, now I am a working class, I've changed class, now I'm a working class kind of person, of color, a woman of color. I have access to these things, and like making this the work, the first iteration of this really problematized that for me, because the spaces I was showing these things in were not those spaces. And the shifting of privilege was really kind of highly problematic. It's like I can show an image of people protesting, but the people protesting are the ones getting arrested. Those are still things I'm thinking about in relationship to those images. And so yeah, it's a very kind of complicated relationship to what that footage is, and if it, and all these questions about like if I have access to it, or my
that ties in with the question of appropriation.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's never easy. It's highly complicated all of the time.
And this embodiment, of course, comes across so strongly in the Typhoon Coming On piece, which is the main piece here. It's an immersive environment. It goes from an ocean image to an image, revisiting a painting of Turner. Yet you connect it, of course, to very 21st century technology. Can you tell us about the genesis of Typhoon coming on?
Sure. So Typhoon coming on is made first and foremost in an open source software called Blender. And the tool that the oceans are made on is called the ocean modifier. This creates a template of an ocean that you can then animate. And so what I've done here is embedded an image, a high resolution image of the Turner painting on this ocean modifier. And what you're seeing is the rendered image of the Turner painting and then a purple ocean, which signifies in this program that there is a missing texture or material. So this color is supposed to be kind of a warning to a maker when the images start popping out after rendering, saying, hey, stop this, something is missing. The Turner painting is here because I'm always thinking about the diaspora. I'm always thinking about the Middle Passage, and I think that it is like incredibly important to think about the Middle Passage in relationship to so many things, in relationship to environmentalism, in relationship to labor bodies. A lot of conversations around labor are happening through kind of like these digital spaces, and I think that we don't have to reinvent the wheel when we're talking about kind of labor and exploitation inside of kind of like the digital realm, because it's a similar kind of like relationship when we're talking about people being moved over oceans in order to become like labor sources. Chroma key is a post-production technique that separates the foreground and the background of an image, and it's then replaced in the post-production. So a lot of times it's CGI. In this case, chroma key blue is used primarily if the scene is taking place in kind of like a void or in darkness. So for me, the chroma key blue is blackness. It is space, it is sci-fi, it's Mars, it's my grandmother's kitchen table, it's all of these things kind of like wrapped into one. And I love the idea of the post-production space because it is inherently kind of I think a collaborative type of space, especially kind of like in film production. There are tons of people working to kind of create the image. But the image isn't being created in a computer in this case. The image is being created by the people who circulate.
And you've said in previous interviews that you're interested in thinking about how blackness shifts, morphs, and embodies technology to combat oppression and surveillance, as you mentioned, throughout the diaspora. So you said blackness is agile. I wanted to ask you to tell us maybe some more about this in relation to the works in the show here at the Serpentine.
Yeah, so like the chroma key blue again is the blue-black space. It's black. It's blackness. It's a multitude of spaces, and like wrapped up in the chroma key is my interest in that. The chroma key in post-production, it can be anything. You can create anything in a CGI kind of like environment, and then just place it there. So when I talk about blackness and its agileness, like literally creating a space in which like that imagining can happen. And imagining is incredibly important because, unflexible imaginations create like terrible spaces for people to live, and so the agileness of blackness exists in the chroma key, exists in post-production for me. And also the agileness of blackness exists in this painting, in this Turner painting, in this ocean. 133 enslaved people were pushed overboard on the Zong ship, but there are also stories that enslaved people threw themselves overboard in protest as well. That is something I'm very interested in, like what it is like to be in resistance, and what it is to be kind of like in a liberatory state. It's not about freedom; it's about what being in liberation kind of like looks like.